And welcome back to Reunited States, the podcast where we aim to bring back civil discourse back to our national dialogue. From Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
And from Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And it has been quite a weekend for the country, but specifically, I should say, for us here in Los Angeles.
Really? Is something happening?
Yeah, you might have heard about it. You know, we got way more than we bargained for.
Oh, no.
We'll get into this in a second. But yes, there are ongoing protests right now with limited amounts of violence as well and looting in it that have been going on for the past number of days following the sudden ICE raid that happened starting, I think, on Friday. I think in total they've detained about 1,000 or a little over 1,000 people. And so, we're not very happy about that. Can't imagine why we wouldn't be happy about that, but we're not. So we are on the streets. It is mostly peaceful. I will say that. I will preface with that. Having seen that, having friends that are there right now and have been there all weekend, it is mostly peaceful. It is a mostly peaceful gathering of people who are very angry and justifiably angry with the government and their actions. However, I will not ignore the fact that there have been opportunists, as there almost always have been in at least recent memory with these sort of movements. There have been opportunists who have taken advantage of this situation to loot businesses, to burn cars, specifically those self-driving cars that you may have heard about. If you hear helicopters overhead, those are in fact helicopters going to downtown right now. I can't really stop that from happening because it's been happening all day. So, you're going to hear it now. Yeah, but it's pretty dicey right now. We've had of course, the National Guard has been called, as many people have already heard. The Marines are here too now as well. A number of 100 of them have been sent to Los Angeles to assist in restraining folks who are getting out of hand. But if you ask me, they're there to instill fear into a lot of these folks, and it's been working. The violence has mostly been increasing as a result of the military presence in Los Angeles right now. I do want to say that the military presence has not really helped a whole lot. Not so far, at least. It's been just kind of like inciting more violence, because now a lot of the people who were protesting previously peacefully are getting angry at, people in bulletproof vests shoving them around with riot gear.
Doesn't help that, it's just people who can't get to their homes and they're getting shot with rubber bullets and...
Yes. Reporters and normal passerby alike are being shot with rubber bullets. It's pretty spooky out there right now, I'm not going to lie. It is pretty spooky. And again, the military is not helping the situation at all in terms of what they are meant to do, which is quell the violence, and what they're actually doing, which is inciting more violence by them being there and them, of course, acting very rough with the protesters. There's numerous videos, eyewitness reports of them being very grabby, very, very hard-handed with the protesters who are kind of in their face. And that doesn't help, because violence only breeds more violence, as we know. But that's the situation on the ground, at least. It's, my bigger concern is that now we have a mandatory curfew yesterday. There's a chance that might continue today, and so on and so forth. I get that it's in an effort to quell the violence and the looting and stuff from happening, but it does, most of the times when there is a curfew, it kind of kills the movement in itself in preventing people from being able to occupy a space. In this case, the space being occupied is the entirety of downtown LA. I couldn't even go to the bar yesterday in downtown because I couldn't be seen outside.
The horrors.
I know, I had to make a drink at home, Jesus.
One thing I want to add, just briefly if I can, is just how this started. because I think that's not clear to a lot of people, like how this started and where it started. And correct me, of course, if there's anything I'm saying that's not correct. But to my understanding, Tyler, this started with a raid on a Home Depot, right? Like this was in Paramount, which is just outside the LA city limits. It is in LA County, but not in LA City. But I believe it started at a Home Depot in which, all of a sudden an ICE truck showed up, an unmarked vehicle showed up, and then a swarm of people, of course, come out and start arresting and detaining people. People are running. It's men, women, children, all running away. And of course, this upsets people. Because these are not violent criminals. Let's be very clear. People at Home Depot trying to go get labor for a day, which is what you do. If you're in this country, if you need somebody, you need movers, you need somebody, there are people at Home Depot that you can go and hire for a day's work. And they work great. And that's what they do for their living. These are not the violent criminals that the Trump administration was promising. We're going to go get those people. No, what it sounds like has happened is Stephen Miller, a.k.a., maybe the worst person on the planet, but certainly in our government. And he is a chief aide to Donald Trump, and he has been kind of the architect of these immigration raids. Stephen Miller decided he screamed at ICE, at the leaders of ICE as recently as last week, screamed at them and said, "Why don't you go to fucking Home Depot?" And so they literally went to Home Depot. He's trying to get the numbers of detainments and deportations up. He wants 3,000 people a day, which again is insane. Like, this is really shocking, kind of fascist level stuff. But yes, so he did that, and so now they're under this pressure. The agents themselves, the agency is under this pressure to go pick up not just dangerous criminals with, who they have gotten warrants for, but now just everybody. And of course, they go to Los Angeles, among many other places. And that started the protests, if I'm not mistaken. That was kind of what led to this was this. Of course, there were various raids happening, but this one at this Home Depot in Paramount really was visible, was very, very, the people filming it. There was a lot going on. It was this swarm of people, felt like an invasion, felt like people literally getting picked up off the streets, because it was. And that is understandably infuriating to a city in which, yes, there are a lot of people who are undocumented in Los Angeles. It is a lifeblood of the city, and for many, many decades, we have all agreed as human beings, and if you look at Republicans in the past, as recently as George W. Bush, we agreed that, we're not going to go deport random people who are just living their lives and working, and we're not just going to go pick them up, certainly off the streets, and throw them into a van. We're going to focus on getting people out of the country who break laws and trying to prevent, of course, as many people from coming into the country as possible, because that leads to humanitarian crises at the border. This is not that. This is really, scary behavior, and it's upsetting people. And from there, of course, these protests happened, and out of these protests, yes, of course, as Tyler, you mentioned, there are always opportunists. There are people who are going to go too far, but sending in the National Guard without the governor's consent isn't really a great place to... It's not exactly, a de-escalation of the situation, is it?
Yes. So again, this started as a peaceful demonstration, in opposition to these raids, to these detainments of peaceful people literally trying to work, and that in turn creating a movement that then, it started in Paramount. It was mainly in Paramount. It kind of went beyond that to encapsulate a Los Angeles. And again, like this is exactly what the administration wants. That's the frustrating thing. This is exactly what they want. They're waiting for the opportunity to silence people's voices, and that's what they're doing now. Right? They knew this is all the playbook. They knew that it was going to be on cameras, that it was going to look as suspicious as it was. They knew that this would incite that sort of response, and they were banking on it. Because they know that once that happens, the left and Los Angeles and our entire pro-immigrant movement falls apart. It falls apart the moment there's violence injected into that movement. And so if you ask me, that's what this is all about. They're trying to get us to be violent. They wanted us to be violent because that's the only way they can shut us up. Because the second we're violent, they can send in whoever, they can start arresting whoever, they can shoot at whoever, they can use their tear gas and their rubber bullets and their hoses. They can run us over on horses. They can knock us back in their cars, which all of these things have been happening. And they can do these things because they just needed that whiff of violence. And so they were banking on getting that whiff. They got it. Unfortunately, it did breed violence. And now we are here in a quasi-military state where Trump is now openly thinking about inciting the Insurrection Act. He's openly considering things like martial law, ridiculous things. And that is not something to scoff at. The idea of martial law, the idea of the Insurrection Act being inside, that is not a nothing burger. Jesse, do you remember what happened to the president of South Korea? He tried to enact martial law for something that did not warrant martial law, and he got ousted.
Yes, well, he basically tried to suspend the government, a whole bunch of things. It was a crazy decision, and fortunately led to the removal of the president there. But yeah, the thing that you make such great points here. You and I have both used the word trap in the last couple of days. This felt like a trap. Like Trump did this, and largely to distract, I might say, from... There are two things that I think Trump is doing. One is to distract from the fact that his big, beautiful bill is not doing so hot, with Elon Musk tossing bombs at it last week, though apparently, Elon is now very sorry for all the things he said, apparently.
I do love that, because, Elon says today, he goes, I think I may have said some things I wasn't proud of. I may have went a little overboard.
Yes, I went too far, and it's like...
My favorite thing about that is, I saw this on Reddit today, that was talking about this exact exchange, and, one of the comments that made me laugh was so he's not saying that they aren't true. He's not saying what he said was a lie. He just said he went overboard.
Yeah.
So it's true?
Oh, Christ. But anyway, so you've got one aspect of this is distracting from this big, beautiful bill that has a very uncertain future and is very unpopular, about to, rip millions of Americans off of Medicaid. And then, on the other side, you have Trump testing the waters to see how far he can go in terms of moving towards declaring martial law. Because it's very clear that that's what he wants to do. He wants to be able to use the power to do it. And so he checks off both boxes here with this. I mean, the news has absolutely taken the bite. The mainstream media is obsessed with this. The right is obsessed with the looting and the rioting, and the left is obsessed with the National Guard and everyone. It's all over. I saw a 15-minute segment yesterday on CNN that was about the car in driving through protesters in Chicago, because they're talking about how this is spreading. It's spreading everywhere. These protests, these riots, all of it is spreading. There's a 15-minute segment in which they talked about this car. They just kept showing it. This car driving through rioters. Now, we're not talking about driving through them as in like trucking them over. Literally just trying to get through, and they're like kind of dispersing. You find out, of course, later that it wasn't some crazy person fighting. It was literally just a car trying to get home, and it couldn't get through the protesters in Chicago. But they're talking about this, like, again, the sensationalism of this. Also, I mean, you and I know Los Angeles, obviously, very well in terms of the geography and whatnot. These protests, it's not like the entire Los Angeles County or entire city of Los Angeles is being impacted by these protests. Like, these have been a very small, contained areas of Los Angeles.
It's two different areas of maybe a few blocks. The Civic Center, where City Hall is, and all those buildings, in fact, where the building where I work in is, that area, they're going around those streets. And then there was, of course, in Paramount, which was the source of this entire event, had, one of the bigger rallies in that specific neighborhood. But most of Los Angeles is not going to see it. It doesn't see any of this. I mean, we hear more helicopters flying overboard than see evidence of the protesting in our neighborhoods. That's going to be most of Los Angeles. But again, you're right. Like the sensationalism, and I'm going to say that both of these, there's error on both sides of the media scale here with the sensationalism, because I think that yes, while it's obvious that the right is focusing on the looting and the burning, we've already seen. In fact, Jesse, you showed me a clip that was calling out certain right-wing voices using clips from like COVID and the BLM protests as a way to say,
Ted
look at
Cruz,
Los Angeles, and they weren't.
Ted Cruz sharing stuff from 2020, which was not even, and it's seen by 10 million people that Ted Cruz shared this, phony video that wasn't even footage from this.
Yeah, so that's clear. That's obviously happening, and happening very much intentionally to make this seem like a bigger thing than it is, but there is, I will say that there is a lot of focus on the destruction that is happening around this, and I think this is kind of like across the board here. There is a lot of focus on the destruction that's happening from the protests, and Jesse, you and I went back and forth on this for quite a long time yesterday, talking about the importance or the necessity to talk about specifically the violence that's occurring as a result of within these protests and within this movement. And my big concern is, of course, not that there is mention of the protesting, or sorry, of the looting and of the violence against of the destruction of vehicles and things like that, of property. Those things are important and they should be denounced. They should be condemned by leaders. And for the most part, they have been. We condemn them. I condemn them. I know you condemn them. There is nothing right about destruction of property, especially when that property belongs to somebody that has nothing to do with the thing that's going on, right? There was a story about a jewelry store that was looted amidst this thing.
There's several jewelry stores.
And I'm like, the guy who owns that jewelry store had nothing to do with this. This is clearly opportunists. As I said earlier, these are all opportunists looking to take advantage of something that is meant to be, something good, something for the community, and using it to, for their own advantage, and using it as an excuse to enact violence on others. And that's horrible, and those people should go to prison and be prosecuted, and all that stuff. But that's kind of where that should end, honestly. If you ask me, that's kind of where that conversation should end. Like, we condemn it, that's it. I no longer need to talk about that. Because the more I talk about that, the less I'm going to be talking about what I consider to be the real actual issue here, which is the trampling of our rights, the trampling of our constitutional rights, of American constitutional rights, by the federal government sending in ICE to round up people, and I am going to say this so firmly, rounding up people regardless of immigration status. They are rounding people up regardless of immigration status. Yes, they are looking for illegal immigrants. They are looking to deport people who are here undocumented. But that's not who they are detaining. They are detaining everybody. They are detaining people associating with people in areas that are historically gathering spots for undocumented immigrants, and they are effectively rounding up everybody there. They are not checking their further licenses. They are asking for their papers. They are throwing them into vehicles, into unmarked white vehicles, and driving them off to undisclosed locations. To this day, undisclosed locations. To do what? Nobody knows. When will they be released? Nobody knows. What will happen to them? Nobody knows. Do they get a phone call? Fuck no. Do they get their lawyer? Hell no. Do they get the Miranda rights? Laughable. That's a laughable assumption that they get any sort of rights. And again, these are people regardless of citizenship status. There are people in the protest saying, these rights should be constitutional rights should be human rights regardless of your documented status. I understand that. I respect that opinion. I do. And I believe you. I agree with you that should be the case. Legally, it's not. But that's not even the problem anymore, because if it were just, if this were pinpointed to specific undocumented citizens, that would be one thing. That would still be a horrible thing, and I would hate it with every bit of my soul as I hate this now. It is not excusable if that's the case, but that is a different story than what is happening right now, which is the detainment of people regardless of immigrant status. That they are doing all this stuff before checking because they are looking for numbers. They are looking to get numbers. They are looking to detain a large, vast amount of people in as quick a time as possible, because they're trying to make a statement. They're trying to make a statement that is filled with fear, to instill fear into us. That's what they're doing. That's the reality of what's happening right now, and that is what is being protested. And that's what should be focused on. Again, I denounce the violence. I do. I know you do too. But, the conversation cannot be lost because there is violence. Just because there is violence, the conversation cannot be lost over what is truly at stake here. What is the real crime that's being committed here? And if you ask me, the big crime, the real crime that is being committed is the federal government ignoring American civil rights, ignoring constitutional rights, and rounding them up without any cause, with no judicial warrant. Remember, they have administrative warrants, not judicial warrants. They legally can't detain anybody. All they can do is go up to you and ask questions, legally speaking. All of this is absolutely inexcusable. So when I see the anger of people who are protesting peacefully, when I see them waving their flags around, when I see them yelling at people, expressing that anger in ways that are not, maybe burning a Waymo car, I understand it. I understand it completely. It is rational to have that reaction. And if you don't think so, if you think that is not a rational reaction, you need to take another look at what is happening and what the significance is of that happening. Because your rights might not be threatened. But if there is even a single US citizen whose rights are threatened in such a way that hundreds possibly, potentially have been over the weekend, then you know what? I hope you'd be angry too. This is an unprecedented thing. This is a whole other ballgame, man. Again, we condemn violence. I'll say it over and over and over again. But I am not going to focus on that when the real problem are the actions of the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, certainly where I kind of come into this, and I think where you and I kind of split in terms of the perspective on this, is I'm looking at it as as a political movement. And I think you and I talked about this yesterday. I look at this very similarly to the way and the pushback against the Trump administration, and I look for the most effective political movements in our history, and the one that feels the most relevant is, amazingly enough, the civil rights movement. If you think back about kind of the parallels, about the weaponization of the police force, of trying to round people up, of violence, you talk about lynching historically, like very scary time for minority communities, African Americans, as well as allies of those groups, doing peaceful things. And so the concern that I voiced yesterday, that I understand is not, entirely popular in certain circles, but the concern that I voiced is that the leaders of the Democratic Party not being as full-throated about some of the violence and looting and acknowledging that it exists. You can't just ignore something because it takes away from your argument. If it's there, you have to address it. If you don't address it, it weakens your argument. I actually think that since we talked yesterday, the funny thing is I think the Democratic Party in general kind of got the message a little bit, because now the narrative has changed. They are focusing a little bit more aggressively on, we do have to stop this looting and rioting. You have to be held responsible for this. People who are opportunists, you should not be associated with the peaceful protesters. And that's what needs to be said, and it's what needed to be said in 2020 in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, and multiple other. We should remember that was a series of just really horrible videos that came out of black men in particular being attacked by law enforcement and by non-law enforcement. I think the damage that got done to the Democratic Party and to the movement that was meant to help, like if you look at Black Lives Matter got tainted by violence that largely had nothing to do with BLM, but we weren't aggressive enough in calling it out and saying that is not us. And that's why I do find that's an interesting distinction that I think has to be made from a strategy point of view, because I don't want the narrative to shift to just talking about the rioting and looting, but it will if we don't address it and we don't stop it. If we don't separate it, we will always get tossed in with that. And, that's problematic for the broader movement, which is we are trying to talk about a significant constitutional crisis and government overreach of the federal government now, and Donald Trump basically ignoring the rights of the people, ignoring habeas corpus, ignoring court orders, all of this, and using the military in a way to control the people and terrorize these communities. And that's disgusting, and we have to be able to focus on that. But we can walk and chew gum at the same time, in my mind. We have to also be able to say, hey, yeah, there are people who are doing fucked up things and we don't associate with them. And I thought this was interesting on Capitol Hill today. You saw John Fetterman put out a post on X yesterday, basically saying, that the Democratic Party is not doing enough to address this. And then I saw they asked AOC about it today, and they asked her about, her comments on John Fetterman talking about the violence and whatnot, and she goes, yes, I think that we do need to talk about the violence of ICE, yada, 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 which is correct. I agree. We do need to talk about the violence of ICE, but you can't just ignore it. You can't just ignore that there is looting and rioting. You have to at least take a moment in that to be like, yes, we condemn that. She didn't. She literally acted like it didn't exist. And when you do that, it looks like we're complicit with those people. And that's really bad for your movement. That's bad for what we're trying to do, which is focus on, holy shit, Trump is literally having the military come into a major U.S. city and lock people up, throw them in vans. That should be the focus. But I'm worried we're going to lose the narrative if we don't call it out. But I will say Karen Bass made some really strong comments yesterday. Gavin Newsom made some really strong comments last night. I kind of look at this from a perspective, I think I mentioned to you yesterday, unfortunately, this is beneficial for all of them. Like, Trump wins because he wants to distract. He wants to push this. Karen Bass, there is no way Karen Bass is getting reelected as mayor of Los Angeles unless she can use herself and say, look, I am defending you against this foreign invasion, or this not a foreign invasion, this military incursion.
Except she's not,
Gavin
and
Newsom,
most people are seeing it that way. At least here
of course
in
not.
the city, nobody sees what she's saying as any sort of assistance to them. In fact, if you look at a lot of the graffiti that is around the Civic Center, where City Hall is, a lot of it is calling her out for being complicit in assisting the federal government to invade her city, our city. And while I recognize that what they expect of her isn't possible in her position, the only thing she could ever do that would make them actually happy is if she literally physically prevented the National Guard or the Marines from actually, like, walking onto LA soil. That's the only thing she'd be able to do with people that would make people be like, oh yeah, you are on our side. Obviously she can't do that. She's not going to do that. She's only going to say things like, I really don't want them here, which doesn't help. So no, the people aren't going to think that she's fighting for them at all. They never have, and they will continue not to. So, sorry, Mayor Bass.
But you're absolutely right. But she doesn't have any motivation to stop this sort of thing, because it does benefit her politically in a desperate attempt. And for Gavin Newsom, I mean, we've already seen Newsom now put out a video this morning that was very, very forceful in talking about everything. And I thought it was a pretty well constructed video. But it is so self-righteous, like, I am going to be the champion, because that's what he wants. He wants to be president.
Yes, Gavin Newsom has no other issue in the sense that he is using this as selfishly as a Democrat could.
Yeah.
Like, listen, I don't hate the guy. A lot of people hate the guy. I don't hate the guy.
I don't hate him either.
I don't think he's terrible. I don't think he's all that terrible, I should say. But I will say that he is a very, very selfish man. He's an extraordinarily selfish man and a very selfish politician. In a sense where when he sees crisis, he will 9 out of 10 things he will do are self-appeasing to himself. Like, he always takes the bait. And think about, like, remember back at during the debates, what did he do? He wanted to do his own debate. He was like, I want to debate Ron. And I'm like, what the fuck? What are you doing? Like, that is such a selfish, stupid thing to do. You could be supporting Democrats. You could be supporting the Democrats that are actually trying to run for the leader, to be the leader of our country. You couldn't try to actually, help your party, but instead you're only doing things to help yourself. That's what we saw a few years ago, and that's what he's doing here now again. When Trump gave him that threat that he would arrest Newsom if Newsom got in the way, Newsom was very happy to take that. Very happy to completely take advantage of that. And listen, it was a great bit. It's a great statement. He's a good speaker. He nailed that response. Strategically speaking, he nailed it. He got on camera and he said, come at me, bro. He said, arrest me along with everybody else, for I am, the leader of California and thus LA. Sure. He said that so well, but there was no intent to actually be arrested in those words.
Knowing full well that that's never going to happen.
Yeah, he knows it'll never happen. He knows Trump's blowing hot air at him just to, say stuff and be inflammatory. But he knows that by egging him on, he's never in any real threat. He's only saying that because it sounds really good and it makes him sound like a badass. And that's all he wants. All he wants is to help his own agenda, to get him up to the presidency seat. That's my big problem with Gavin Newsom, especially in times of crisis, is that he will never fail to put himself before his state, and then he'll work on his state. But not before throwing in those little golden nuggets to help his own political career. I mean, you look at the biggest controversies he's ever had was during COVID, was avoiding the COVID lockdowns for his little parties or whatever it was. Completely
French Laundry in Napa.
Yeah, completely self-appealing. That's the Newsom problem there. He doesn't ever mean something selflessly. I can never trust him to mean something selflessly.
And a crisis is an opportunity for him, and I think that's very much the mentality with this, and that's why I'm sitting here a little frustrated, feeling like you probably could have done more to shut this down in terms of the looting, the rioting. You probably could have done more off the bat. You know what they both could do? They could both be there. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if they were willing to go out there and speak and say, hey, let's calm this down. We will have peaceful protests. We will not be violent, but this is not okay. What's going on is not okay in terms of ICE. That would be really effective because, then they're leading the messenger.
Do you remember earlier this year when we had the strikes, the union strikes? Part of what made that so effective was not just the length of them, but part of what made that so effective was that they had leaders. They had leaders that were on the ground with them. They were prominent people in the industry. There were senators. There were elected leadership amongst the strikers. They were there, and they were using their presence to elevate the situation. And I would say that was probably one of the biggest reasons it was successful in the first place. It was because there were those prominent people that were there, boots on the ground. And yeah, a part of me thinks, yeah, no shit they were there because it was a safe thing. It wasn't dangerous, it was just a strike. Nothing's dangerous about a strike. So they don't have any problem going down and assisting people who are just trying to get better wages and all that. But all of a sudden you throw a little smoke, you put in something that actually affects Americans and their liberties, and just because it's a little dangerous, all of a sudden, where are they? They're nowhere to be found. They are in a chair miles away tweeting about it.
You make a great point about leadership. I referenced the civil rights movement earlier. Why was the civil rights movement so effective? Because it had great leadership. We can talk about the flaws of Martin Luther King, Bayard Rustin, the list goes on, John Lewis. We can talk about flaws, but there was a pretty clear power structure there, and there was also a visible leader of what the movement was and a spokesperson for the movement. The anti-Trump movement in this country continues to lack leadership because it's always politicians. It's always politicians, and they're always going after each other. We need somebody leading the anti-Trump movement who is not a politician, or who is not somebody who will want to seek the presidency. Because that's the issue, is that then it turns into this kind of political spat where they start competing with one another. We need somebody who we genuinely know is doing it just because they care. And I don't know who that person is.
The big problem with the politician thing is, like what I said about Newsom, is they're always going to be acting selfishly.
Yeah.
There is going to be self-interest involved in wanting that movement. Whether it is more power in the Senate and the House, whatever it is, or the presidency itself. That's always going to be the forefront of their mind, because that's who these people are. There are no selfless politicians. Not right now. There aren't.
No, and so we need somebody who's not a politician, who doesn't want to be a politician, who has no interest in that, to be kind of the face of this anti-Trump resistance. And I'm not sure who that's going to be. I'm not sure if we're ever going to find somebody to fill that role. But we damn well need one. Because if you look at recent movements that have failed, look at Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street, you forgot about it, but you forgot about it for a reason, because it failed. Because it failed epically. And part of the reason was they insisted we have no leaders of this movement. If anyone has ever watched the HBO show The Newsroom with Jeff Daniels, fantastic show. But, that highlights that period of time and why that movement failed. Was that there were no leaders. They had a great cause, which was basically Wall Street is robbing us blind, and these guys are getting rich while, no one else is, and young people were saying, wow, young people don't have opportunity. All of it, they were right. No one, even now, you would hear Trump's people, the MAGA people agreeing with that. They were a very populist movement, but they had no leader. They had no one that could lead their movement, and it's very clear that the issue is the MAGA movement has a leader. They found somebody, whether we like him or not, they found somebody that leads them, that is the voice that guides that movement, and that's why it continues to be successful. We don't have a leader in opposing him, and it's not going to come from a politician. It's just not. It's not. Unless Barack Obama wants to lead it because he no longer is a politician, unless Barack Obama wants to be on the ground, which I don't think he wants to do. He doesn't want to do that anymore, and I don't blame him. We don't have anyone who can speak to people in a way that is actually, convincing and give a clear and concise message, and restrain. It's not just about amping people up. It's also about restraining people when they go too far. We don't have anyone that's willing to do that right now.
I would go one step further and say it can't even be someone like Obama.
Yeah, you're probably right.
It would need to be someone that people on the right could reasonably understand and respect to some degree. And Obama already has that negative opinion amongst most of the right. There are going to be groups of people that are going to see Obama and think, oh, well, no, he's going to be lying again. Obviously all ridiculous things. But he already has that opinion amongst certain political groups because he was the president, that I think that even that wouldn't be as effective as we would think. It would be more effective than a current politician, but it would be less effective than someone who just never had a connection to it.
It can't be a traditional celebrity either. George Clooney is not going to be this person. Right. No one trusts them anymore either. It has to be somebody that has come up through groundworks, through the movement of in some sort, working for people. Working for, I don't know. I don't know who it is. But it can't be a politician. It can't be a celebrity. And those are the two, pillars of the Democratic Party right now in terms of the visibility. It's, celebrities and politicians.
I'll tell you who it should be. If I had my way, I'll tell you the kind of person that it should be, that I think would be the most ideal. I think the most ideal person would be a pastor.
I could not agree more.
I think a pastor would be the best. I mean, MLK was a pastor.
Look, why do you think that I'm all on board with Raphael Warnock leading the Democratic Party from a political? I don't think he could do this because, again, he's a senator now. But I think he absolutely has the ability to be a fantastic candidate at the presidential level, because he's literally the pastor at the church that Martin Luther King was the reverend for. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It could be a pastor. Because there needs to be this level that brings a level of comfort with certain people in the middle and on the right. Who need to. I keep saying, I'm not a religious person, but I do want the Democratic Party to take back some religion. Which is crazy. You would have never heard me say that a decade ago. But I believe that if we forfeit religion to the crazy right-wingers, then religion just becomes, like it's getting worse and worse because the only people who are staying with it are crazy people. So
and religion means more than just the teachings of a specific demographic, right? Whether it's Christianity or Judaism or whatever, it means more than that. Like religion is a community, right? It's a purpose. It's a purpose that people have, and that for many of them literally allows them to continue living. And it's been that way for generations upon generations, for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. Religion means more than a church, right? It's not about a church. And so when we talk about, taking back religion, we mean we have to take back the idea that it's okay, the idea of that community. Because there are people in this country who will never let that go, because rightfully so, there are people in that country who are so transformed by the idea of faith that is their entire livelihood. That is their entire life. That's everything they live for. And that's okay. That is them, as a lot more people than I think a lot of folks realize. It's why it's important to not ignore it, right? Because those people are also, unfortunately, very prone to certain types of misinformation. Because, again, when you have faith in something, undoubtedly, it kind of opens the door to have faith in other things with similar, recklessness. And I think that, by continuing to, isolate them, by trying to be the party of the future, by the progressive party, not worried about, the old, crotchety religions of the past, you are allowing these people to get picked up by folks who mean to transform them and transform their way of thinking into something that is wholly more dangerous for the country.
Yeah.
And so we do need to take it back. We do need religious leaders who are morally correct, who say things everyone can agree with. And I know that there are pastors out there who say things that even you could agree with. It's not a matter of whether or not you believe in the same God. If you say something that, that people can agree with, then that's all that really matters, right? Having that same moral principle, regardless of where that moral principle comes from. The fact that it's still there is important. And that kind of leader is the kind of person we need, especially when we take it back to reuniting the states. That is the fast track to reuniting the states.
Yeah, and you make a great point there across the board. And I generally, I agree with you first and foremost that there are religious leaders that say things all the time that I say, wow, I really agree with this. I don't, again, I'm not a spiritual person and believing in a higher power, but I've been to church with friends of mine, and have seen, congregations that are bringing joy to their communities, that are about bringing people in rather than, pushing them away. Those things are important to our society. I may not partake or believe in the same God or higher power in that way, but I do believe that level of, there is a moral authority in those figures that exists for a reason, and it would be great to be able to see one of those figures step into a leadership role, because we need it right now. If there is anything that is very clear by this past weekend, it is a leadership vacuum on the left. And we are just not with it. And Gavin Newsom, I'm sorry, I hear all these people who are, CNN put up, Newsom is now the leader of the opposition against Trump. No, he's not. He's not. He's never going to be, because he can't bring in people outside of people who already agree with him. Also, literally 2 months ago, people on the left were about to, burn Gavin Newsom at the stake for his thoughts on, transgender athletes and et cetera, et cetera. We're so fickle as a society that we can't remember, these things that just infuriate us day to day. So, no, it's not going to be Gavin Newsom. It needs to be somebody who's not a politician. And you make a great point. If it's a religious person, a religious leader, that would be ideal. And we need it fast, though. We need to figure out who that person is going to be, and we need to start being able to rally around them and start sending them to all these different places. They need to be willing to go to the front lines of these different fights to, again, not just to provide clarity, but also to provide restraint. And that would be really beneficial for us, and we need it fast. Where is... Yeah. Come on, Leo. Anyway. All right. Well, certainly going to continue monitoring this situation, continue talking about it, continue highlighting the federal overreach, and hopefully by next week things will have gotten better, I hope, in this situation and not worse. But the reality is hundreds, if not thousands of people have been detained, and many of whom will never go back to their families here in the United States. And that's a tragedy in and of itself. And it's wrong. And so, yes, you need to go out there. I know there's a lot of people in Los Angeles who listen to this show. Yes, you need to go out there. You need to stand up for your fellow residents, for the people, your neighbors. You need to stand up for them. Of course, do it peacefully, because everything else is a distraction. Everything else distracts from the point of what we're talking about, which is trying to protect people. And if you see people doing things, you need to call out people who are doing things that cross a line. But we have to keep working on this. We have to keep standing up. We can't let Trump and his fascist cronies terrify us into being silent. So until there is a leader, you have to be the leader.
And that's the biggest fear, too. We don't know how this is going to develop, but honestly, I see two things happening. One of two things happening here. Either A, the intensity of the protesting escalates, as it has been escalating over the past few days because of the additional presence of the military and continued presence of the military. Pete Hegseth did say that the Marines will stay there for 60 days.
Insane.
60 days.
Costing $134 million.
That is insane. Not only is it an insane waste of resources, as the National Guard's barely even needing to do anything. This is clearly just a show of force, but it's also an additional incitement of violence. It is more opportunity for people to be angry because people don't like the military and people don't like policing. And they're telling you to get the hell off? Yeah, of course you're going to react violently. That's what they're hoping for. That's what's going to happen. One of two things is going to happen. They're either going to get more angry and more, maybe not violent, but they're going to definitely teeter on the edge. Right. And all they need to do is threaten a little bit. They just need, listen, you got to understand, like these National Guards, these military folks, they just need to be threatened to show force. They just need to be threatened. They don't need to be punched in the face. They don't need to be thrown rocks at. They just need to feel threatened. If they feel threatened, they will respond with force. And then you're gonna tell me, oh hey, like look what LA is doing. They're so violent. My guy, most of this violence is not even being started by us. When it comes to the rubber bullets, when it comes to the pushing, when it comes to women being trampled by horseback riders, when it comes to a dude getting pushed back by a moving ICE vehicle, knocked back, smacked his head on the pavement, and lost consciousness while the car drove off through a crowd of other people. When you're talking about people being literally pulled off of the sidewalk and beaten with sticks for doing nothing but existing in a space, you cannot tell me that, we are the agitators when that is literally what is happening most of the time. It is absolutely horrendous. But here's the thing. That's going to continue to happen. It's going to escalate. Or or the military presence, which will be here for 60 days, is going to scare everyone off, and no one's gonna hang out because no one wants to get shot by a fucking bullet. So everyone's gonna go back to their homes, and the entire protest will disperse, and the movement will die, which is also what they want. And then who wins? You said silencing voices. That's literally silencing voices. We're either going to get angry or we're going to get scared. And either way, the government wins. Either way, Trump wins. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that we are standing at the precipice of one of the most flagrant violations of constitutional rights I've ever seen. Either we shut up and everything's complicit and we never see these people again, or we get violent and people get hurt and people die and we still never see these people again.
I think there's a middle ground. I do. I believe that there's a middle ground between those two things, and we've seen it. We saw this again. I get that the civil rights movement was 60 years ago, but some of these things are the same procedures. And when we talk about civil unrest, when we talk about civil disobedience, good trouble, as the late John Lewis would have called it, I feel like he just knew. You know, he gave that good trouble speech and whatnot. He knew he was passing away. I do feel like he just knew that we were going to need a guide for how to resist in this type of environment, and I think we have it. But we need a leader to lead us through it. And until that point, what we can do is protest peacefully. You can, commit acts of civil disobedience, but that doesn't mean harming property. It certainly doesn't mean, like, please, don't tag all of downtown. Like that, ICE isn't going to have to clean that up. Your tax dollars are going to clean that up. Well, on that note, should we move on to our favorite segment, things we should all agree on? So I'm actually going to reference a video that I posted on Instagram. Tyler, I think you commented on. Someone that we both really like, a man named Jeff Jackson, if you're not familiar with him, via TikTok, via all of social media. He is a former representative for the Democratic Party in North Carolina. He was kind of famous for kind of breaking down how bills work, and how everything, kind of the structure of Congress works. He is now the Attorney General of the state of North Carolina, and he continues to provide insights and commentary about things that are going on. And he posted a video that I think is really important, talking about this big, beautiful bill, and one aspect of this bill is eliminating the ability of states to regulate artificial intelligence on their own, because it says Congress will do it instead. And look, you don't have to be a tech genius or some Silicon Valley doomsday prepper to see what's coming. You just have to be awake. We live in a moment where artificial intelligence is evolving faster than the laws that govern it, and faster than our own understanding as human beings, faster than our ethics can keep up with it. So, at the same time, we're treating it just like it's another app. And AI isn't a toy. It's not just smarter Google searches or talking fridges or, deep fake Tom Cruise on TikTok. It is algorithms that are going to be impacting our everyday life forever. And there are serious concerns about the way it can be used. We talk about, AI-generated propaganda flooding our feeds. We talk about misinformation as it is being so hard. AI is making that harder and harder every day. And while all of this is accelerating, Congress is holding hearings. I like it's still 1998 and we're arguing about like violent video games and whether or they, create violent behavior. Like this is not enough anymore. We are past the point of curiosity. We are at the point of consequences, and they're only going to get worse. And we've seen this in the past. We saw what happened when Congress didn't regulate the internet, when they didn't regulate social media in any capacity. The damage that has been done to our mental health from completely unregulated, and the damage to our world, we should say, with this disbelief in information and all of this that has come from no regulations or no guardrails being put on social media and on the internet, has caused serious, serious problems in our society. And so there has to be regulation, and that's real, enforceable, nonpartisan, forward-thinking legislation. And because we can't wait. If we wait until the damage is done, the damage will be permanent. What happens when, all of a sudden AI, and we may be at the point where it is sentient, where the science fiction films of our past become reality? That's what we're moving towards. And there's really only one group of people that can regulate that, and that's Congress. And I understand that they are afraid that if we regulate AI, that China will beat us in AI. I get that. But if we don't regulate it, AI will beat us in AI. We don't get many chances in history to steer the future, but this is one of them. So let's stop pretending this is someone else's problem, because this is our problem. And if we wait, we're going to be too late to solve it. That's what I got for you.
Ooh, that's a great one. Couldn't agree with you more. I remember I was talking to my wife about that exact video yesterday. And the idea that this bill might be passed with such a small and seemingly insignificant but very, very impactful excerpt just kind of reminds me of the importance of reading bills. Just how important it is to read every detail of a contract, of a bill, of whatever, because you never know what things are going to slip in that can have disastrous consequences. And it's never the thing that's talked about. It's never the thing that people want to talk about. People want to talk about the big beautiful bill and all the tax cuts and everything, because that's the smokescreen almost, right? They don't want to talk about this one tiny thing where it's oh, by the way, it might fuck you over for the next 10 years by preventing you from limiting AI and screwing over workers that work in creative industries, possibly forever. Because in 10 years a lot could happen. And I mean, as someone who knows way too many people in that industry that are already impacted by AI, who are already struggling to find work because of AI, this would kill them. They'll be flipping hamburger patties tomorrow if this happens. It's very, and they're very good at what they do too. It's so unfortunate. Mm-hmm. And this could be all, this could be mitigated if we just, pay attention. But yeah. Great points. Couldn't agree with you more. For my things we can all agree on, I'm going to be a little more lighthearted on this. This is also from a video that I saw recently. In fact, it's a video that I shared with you. I shared with you a video on Instagram, Jesse, about this dude who made a cameo prompt for George Santos.
Yes.
It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So there's this guy on Instagram and on TikTok named Jimmy Clifford. And he only has a few videos because he just started doing this, but he has this segment where he makes the most insane scenarios, the most ludicrous scenarios he can think of, and puts them as a prompt on Cameo, which, if you don't know, is a service in which you can ask a celebrity or famous person to make a personalized video to you, and they'll do it with whatever prompt you give them. And so famously, George Santos, disgraced former Congressman George Santos, is on this site because, man's got to make a living, I guess. And so this guy found that and wrote like this most amazing prompt about how he had a brother who was fat, and his fat brother is now being encouraged to take Ozempic from his parents and share his parents' Ozempic prescription, but the brother doesn't want to do this and he's complaining about the shots. So the prompt asks George Santos to convince this little like imaginary fat kid to take Ozempic because being skinny is better than being fat. And he does. George Santos gives him like a 5-minute video. And it's the funniest thing I've ever seen because he goes so above and beyond the prompt. Like George straight up goes like, "You are a skinny queen. Be a skinny queen. Like, no one wants to be fat. That's for losers." It's because you go, skinny queen. Take those shots. Don't worry, it's just a needle. Think of like the rest of your life. You'll be so happy because you'll be skinny. What's a few needles? It's the funniest thing. It is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And so my things we can all agree on is that this is the sort of like malicious compliance, like jabs, that we totally should be doing to people like George Santos. It's like there are ways to to jab at celebrities. There are ways to defame people that I might not necessarily agree with, even if I don't like the person themselves. But this is just, one, it's objectively hilarious, and two, they have the agency to do what they want. They chose to do that. You just kind of, gave a little nudge, right? But that's the sort of thing where I'm like, man, if this is the way we get back at like disgraced celebrities and people, I would not be mad. I would not be mad if their own undoing was going off the rails, responding to cameo requests that are just so ridiculous. I mean, come on, nobody with a reasonable mind can read that descriptor and say, yeah, that's a reasonable thing to talk about. I'm gonna reasonably and of clear state of mind, I'm going to convince a child to take Ozempic because I'm going to convince them that being skinny is so much better than being fat. Ozempic is the right choice for them. An 11-year-old child. I'm going to read that prompt and think, yes, I am going to do this. That's on you. And you know what? That's okay. Do that. It's not deep faked. You did it yourself. That is 100% a real video that you made. So you buried yourself. So you know what? I hope this guy does 100 of these with all sorts of people. You know what? Because it's on you if you're gonna say crazy shit like that, man. So you know what?
Man.
Take that direction. Get back at those people that way. I would love to see it.
George Santos is going to need that money because he's about to go to prison for 7 years. So we got it now. Wow, what a video. I mean, yeah, he's like, they're investing in your health or something like that. You should be grateful. Oh, George. Yeah. Wow. What a time. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to us today. We're hoping for happier things to talk about in the future. I'm not especially optimistic, but we're hoping for happier things. And until then, remember, don't let your voice be silenced. Do so in an effective, strategic manner, and keep working to bring people to our side. We're not just talking about shunning other people, talking about bringing people to our side, an open tent, bringing people in. With that, be sure to follow us on Instagram if you don't already, at Reunited States Pod. Until next week, from Manchester, New Hampshire, I'm Jesse Saywell.
And from Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
And this has been Reunited States. When the whole world has got you down, and there's no one else around,